All right, hi everyone. We're tuning in today to Landian's AMA. I'm Melissa, I'm a new member of our team here at Landian, and we're very excited to have you tuning in with us. I'm here with our CEO, Austin, if you maybe want to say hello to everyone.
Hey everybody, great to see you again. Sorry I've been away for a little while. We've been anxiously working on the auction preparation for Tier 1 coming up in just a few weeks. So happy to be here and happy to see everybody again. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so today we're going to be covering a lot of information. We have some new information about the Metaverse and the progress we've been making. Of course, the sale that is upcoming, and we're very excited to go through that with you. Please remember to share this link. We're streaming live on YouTube with your friends, with your family, with your community, and also be sure to leave your comments or questions in our Discord or our Telegram group. So to go ahead and get started, maybe for folks that are new to learning about the Metaverse or about Landian, can you give them an idea of what Landian is and why it exists?
Sure, absolutely. So Landian is the largest Metaverse that's ever been conceived. It's roughly 43 billion square meters in total size, about 10% the size of the actual moon. It is a space for people to not only collaborate in a new way. You can use virtual environments, whether it be VR headsets, you can use a desktop, you can use a tablet, you can use your mobile browser, it doesn't make a bit of difference. It's a place for people to engage, but also a place for people to flourish in terms of communities, entrepreneurial spirits, anything that you might be looking to build. It creates an entire community of people that have the ability to develop things both by themselves and collaboratively with others, and effectively creates a new way to do business and engage with others.
Yeah, I think that's really, really great to point out, because I think a lot of people maybe have the perception that the Metaverse is a video game or a place where, you know, for children to play.
Yep.
And I think it's really important to point out that business is done there, that you'll find community, organization, you know, and people from different cultures sort of conjoined in one space.
Absolutely. There was actually a recent McKinsey study that just came out about a month and a half ago, I believe. And they did an analysis of where the Metaverse is going to be effectively by 2025 and 2030. That number originally was $5 trillion by 2030, and it's been updated by Citi to now be $30 trillion by 2030. Of that, 50% of it is meant to be e-commerce. The other remaining bits are gaming, education, experiential, so on and so forth. So what people perceive right now as the Metaverse is certainly not what the next generation of the internet is going to be.
Nice. Yeah, a little later we're going to be talking a little bit about people's perception of the .com and what that might look like in the future with the Metaverse.
Absolutely.
So the news that we really wanted to get into today, and I want to mention that moving forward we will have a surprise, so stay tuned for that announcement, because we're going to be giving out an exclusive wallpaper to the first 3 Landians that post a video or a picture of themselves watching this AMA on Twitter, but that's not yet. Just be ready for it when we announce it a little later. So the first piece of news that I wanted to get into is that we have some Mocap hardware that we've been testing here in the office. So if you could maybe talk about what we've been testing and how we've maybe been using that technology to think about how it might integrate into the Metaverse.
For sure. So for those of you that don't know, Mocap is an abbreviation for motion capture. Mocap can be used for a variety of different things. We have different hardware here right now that allows us, as some of you have seen with the avatars that we've created for you, the ability to capture physical characteristics of a person by using a combination of lasers and photographs at the same time. That can be a facial scan all the way down to a car or whatever it needs to be beyond that point. Capturing that is one thing, but then we actually a lot of times need to animate that. And fortunately, humans, at least at this moment, still do a better job of being human than computers do. So the best thing that we can do is we can capture those movements with people, and that's in the form of motion capture suits. A lot of very sophisticated photography that we use, and depth of field that actually determines how far people are away from certain things. That gives us the ability to capture biometric characteristics on things like your face, your jaw, your mouth, how you actually speak. Once that's created in your avatar, as an example, it gives you the ability to not only record how someone moves, but also how they speak and how they interact with others. In the future and right now, we do have the ability, and we're working with a tremendous amount of commercial clients that are using this for things like customer service, consultation, so on and so forth, the entire sales process. If you can imagine taking the very best salesperson that an organization has, allowing them to live on in infinite and realms inside the Metaverse, and only having to pay one time to actually capture all of that voice and all of those movements. This is a small example of what you can do with some of this, and because of these demands, we're working with a lot of clients that are requesting more realistic movements, more realistic interactions.
Yeah, I feel like what is interesting about the metaverse is that imagination is really, it proves how limitless the potential in that world is, and I think the mocap technology sort of gives people that maybe don't have an idea or vision of what it could look like, an idea of what it might feel like or look like
Absolutely.
in the future.
Absolutely.
So our next piece of news is that we are very, very close to selling our first tier of plots. And so I wanted to go ahead and remind the people maybe the steps that they would need to take when that time comes. You know, how will they purchase their Linda? How will they go through and purchase, you know, what they'll need in order to purchase the lots, and what should they keep in mind?
So as you guys know, any of you can go to Landian.io right now, and you can go through the swap process. You can come in with a variety of different currencies and actually swap over to LNDA tokens. You will need LNDA tokens to purchase plots within the space. There are going to be 720,000 plots made available inside of Tier 1 that are roughly 10 by 10. Of those, a lot of you know this as well, we have plots of land, we have blocks of land, and we have mega blocks of land. They get bigger as you go, and you have the ability to grab all of those all at once as a mega block if you'd like, or you can grab individual pieces. So in preparation for the auction that is scheduled for the beginning of September, we have the ability right now to ask people to go in and try and grab your LNDA tokens if you don't already have them. You can store them in your wallet for future use. Once you have everything in place, we'll be publishing the map of what's going to be available about a week beforehand. It's honestly already finished, and I know a lot of you really, really want to see it, but you will soon enough, trust me. Beyond that point, as soon as the auction goes live, anyone can go in, click on the plots, and as long as you're loaded and ready to go, it becomes your land, and that's it.
Amazing. And so we're looking at September 1st at the moment, so keep that in mind, and you'll of course see more information about that from us as we're getting closer to that date. I want to take a moment really quickly to shout out some of the viewers that we have. So we have Josh OWTB, we have, and I might pronounce this wrong, we have Clunt Bumpscrint, we have Pistol Grip Pete 49, and we have Proud to Be an American. Thank you so much for tuning in. Wanted to give you guys a quick shout out before we continue. So now we're going to get into some questions about the evolution of the metaverse. And so I guess to start, how would you go ahead and define Web 3.0 and what was its purpose?
That's a great question. So I think the best way to think about this is if you rewind to Web 1, right? We have a lot of clients right now that are coming up to us and they're saying, we want to be in the metaverse. In 1995, I had a company, I was very young at the time, and I had a company that did web pages, network connectivity, a bunch of different things for people. And I would have clients come up to me and say, I want to be online. What does that mean exactly? Am I going to make you a website that effectively has your company name, your phone number, and your business hours? Because this is before Google existed or any app that could actually walk you through that. What that turned into was a more immersive experience where not only were you providing information, but you were providing details of those services or of those experiences or whatever they may be. And this goes back to what we were talking about before. It started in the business community and really pushed its way out. Right now in the business community, we're having a lot of people saying, I want to be in the metaverse. What does that mean? It could be as simple as the 1995 instance of a web page where it's just, this is my business presence. I have a kiosk here. I have a customer representative that's standing there. I have a big logo of whatever my company is on the side of this building. There's so many different things that you could do to interpret that. I think as Web 1 evolved into what we would define as Web 2, which was not just more immersive and interactive, but it was the first time where things like social media started playing a role into the experiences that people would have. So now you're in a place where that information is no longer static. It's very fluid, and the way that people are presenting things is hopefully more truthful whenever possible, and more available to a broader audience, right? So it's not this finite, this is my building, this is my logo anymore. It is, this is my building, this is my logo, and here's 50 happy customers and 2 really unhappy customers that have been telling the entire internet about their poor experience that they have because somebody didn't give them a straw in their drink or whatever it may be. So ultimately, we don't know what's going to happen with Web 3, Web 3.5, Web 4, Web 5, whatever you want to call it. Jack Dorsey says that Web 5 is already here. So today, what I will say is that the metaverse is something that exists on top of the internet as we know it. It's a new way to experience the internet. It's a new way for people to experience visualizations, interactions with each other, the way that they can actually walk up and pick up an item, look at it, get information on whatever it may be, throw it off the top of a building and have it land inside a dragon's lair, whatever you want to do. We have the ability of creating all of those things right now, but I think the most important questions are going to come as, is that experience something that is going to live on? Is it useful? And is it something that people are going to want to do as opposed to being on the internet? And as of right now, the answers are looking like a profound yes for all of those. Recent statistics are basically saying 74% of Americans say that they want to be in the metaverse in one capacity or another in the next year. Of everybody in the entire world that was looking at things like VR headsets 2 years ago, where the penetration was only about 64 million people for the entire planet, by 2024, that number is going to be 2 billion. So between hardware evolution, the increases in speeds of the internet, reduction in latency and everything else, a lot of these things are becoming a reality that were just conceptual a few years ago. What it turns into, not our decision to make. What Landian's job is to give you all of the tools to make the coolest experience possible.
It sounds like very similar frontiers that you're crossing, but just with a myriad of more opportunity and more possibility.
Absolutely.
Which is very, very exciting. I'd love to know a bit more about what needed to evolve from Web 1 in order to make space for Web 2.
For Web 2. During that time, you had very similar issues and things that needed to be developed and things that needed to be accomplished in order to make that transition. In the beginning, you had a 56K modem. That modem was capable of downloading X amount of information, traditionally in kilobytes. So if you wanted a really fancy website, it might have been 2 megabytes in terms of total size. And that 2 megabytes would have taken a decent amount of time, almost a minute to download. So as we progressed into Web 2, the availability of data and whatever the assets were that were going to be displayed not only became broader because the speeds were faster, the computers were bigger, you had the ability to store information, you had the ability to access it for the first time remotely, which was honestly a very strange concept as you went through the late 90s into the early 2000s. Now, we're really akin to being able to stream at the highest resolution possible 24 hours a day, no matter where we are in the world. 5G, 6G on the tail end of that coming up right now. We have mobile devices that have gigabytes worth of storage, and we don't even think that's cool anymore. The fact that I can take all of Wikipedia, all of it, and I can put it on one flash drive and keep it in my pocket is insane. If you think about where we were just a few years ago. So as things have progressed, both in the hardware, the speed of the internet, the data storage, the compression, everything associated with how you have those experiences, that's what caused that evolution to happen. And right now, what we see as VR headsets today, they're going to look like brick phones 2 or 3 years from now. Augmented reality coming up really soon, guys, with Apple and Google Lens, the new Apple Lens. I mean, they're anticipating 1.5 million sales of those things at $2,000 a piece. There is a huge market for this, and people are going to jump right in. It's our responsibility and the responsibility of our community to anticipate what those changes are going to be and be ready to create ultra great experiences for the people that are using those devices for the first time.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about how integrated into our lives this will be for the average person in the same way that, those changes in internet became integrated into our lives now.
Absolutely. And I guess, as we think about the evolution of that later, eventually the hardware just goes away.
Right. Kind of like you said, the internet from 10 years ago would almost feel unlivable, I think, to most people
Absolutely.
now.
Can
It
you
would feel
imagine?
impossible, right?
Okay, just one Instagram page.
Right.
How long would that take you to experience?
Right. Or needing to get off the internet because someone's calling.
Right.
Changes. So my next question is sort of related. How would you describe the hype of social media in the last decade?
Awful. I think it's one of the worst things that's ever happened to our society. That's just me. I have a very particular opinion about this. Many of you know I've never been on social, and corporate presence is one thing, but I value my privacy. I think that blockchain technology, decentralization as a whole, and the advent of some of these new protocols that are coming out right now, you're going to see a very drastic shift in what we consider social media today and what the perception of these interactions is going to be in the future. And that shift is going to be driven by advertising revenue that doesn't need to be there anymore, right? Content that doesn't need to be recommended to you anymore. And information that is actually relevant to you, your friends, the people that you interact with. And the only way to do that really is to take control of your own information. Right? And unfortunately, the same way that the hardware and the internet and everything else was very expensive, right now all of those things are practically free, and some of them are 100% free. In a world like that, you don't necessarily need to rely on some of the social media giants to provide you with that information, particularly if it's not information that you even care about. Right. So I think that social media as a concept, as a way to connect with people, is something that's really wonderful. What it's turned into is not at all that.
Right.
And what I would love to see is a shift back to the original ideals associated with that, which were better ways to interact with people that you either know or had similar interests to you in one capacity or another.
Right. So we talked a little bit about what was needed to be left behind from Web 1 to Web 2. Mm-hmm. From Web 2 to Web 3, what evolved and what sort of got left behind in that transition?
Yeah, I think going back to very similar things. We don't have banner ads anymore. We don't have to worry about a lot of these pop-ups that we used to have to deal with. Now this data is being harvested and mined in a particular way and resold without us even realizing it. And when you get ads in your Gmail and when you get notifications on your Samsung Smart TV and you get this, that, and the other, it's all because it's a very large interconnected web of information that, albeit mostly encrypted, is your information and it's about you. Companies like Google, when they bought Nest as an example, which the rest of the world just perceived it was a thermostat company, Nest was important to them because it had the ability to actually listen to your environment. Right. And if it heard a baby crying in your room, it would recommend a Pampers ad for you on your smart TV. And a lot of people didn't realize that. And that's carried over into our mobile devices, into the earbuds that we wear, into absolutely everything today. So whether or not that information is anything that you feel the rest of the world should have access to is a decision you're going to be able to make in the future.
Right.
And how these companies that have become giants decide to monetize that and shift is already being seen right now. Right? And the way that advertising revenue, click ads, everything else is shifting over into these different concepts, I think we're going to see more and more of that. And I think that those markets will become niche enough that they're relevant enough without being annoying. Hopefully.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of what excites people about the metaverse in general is this idea of the power going back to the individual, back to the people, decentralized communities, which are super important, especially given social media hype and how our data is moved with or without our knowledge currently. So with that in mind, what do you expect for Web 3 and the evolution of the metaverse, NFTs, crypto, and decentralized networks?
I would just hope for a more decentralized world, if you will. Decentralized marketplaces, places where people can speak their minds, for the most part, without being filtered in any way. An environment where different community members are able to interact with each other without trolls coming in and causing problems, without bots coming in and kicking you out. And also, there's a lot of social anxiety that exists even in a world where you're just looking at a 2D screen. So in a weird way, and it's a hard thing to describe, but when you are an avatar and you walk up to another avatar and you have an experience, it feels more human in a strange way. And oddly enough, people are actually a bit more respectful than they would be if they were just sitting there with their light out at night on their laptop saying mean things about others or whatever it may be. And we hope, that this actually brings a bit of human connectivity back into the field. We hope.
I also hope. So my last question before we get into announcing our little surprise is, do we think that we'll eventually see a Web 4, and what might you expect or think about when that comes to mind?
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of like looking at the evolution of anything. In this case, we're talking about perceived consciousness, right? So as we drop these barriers between what we know is real and what we can't decipher as being real any longer, I think that's completely going to change the way that we experience the world and information. There is some incredible technology that's out there right now. We're all familiar with Neuralink and companies like this that are actually talking about embedding chips into people, and this is being done with good intentions. It's their entire ethos is around people that have suffered trauma, that are paraplegic or whatever it may be, being able to control things with their minds. That's ultimately going to turn into a stream that goes straight into your brain, right? There are stepping stones for that right now. Today it is a VR headset. Tomorrow it's going to be an augmented pair of Ray-Bans that you don't even notice if somebody's watching a game while they're having a conversation with you. There are already contacts that allow you to put it in and actually stream into the back of your eye perceived augmented reality on batteries. So turning this into something that becomes a part of us is not that far away. And as a society, I think we have to make a decision about whether or not we're ready for that, and if it's something that's going to benefit us as humans. It can give you an edge, it can give you an advantage if you know what's happening in your environment around you, and that can be as simple as doing it while you drive your car and being notified if something jumps in front of you or if something is important that you need to be aware of. But ultimately, how do we transition out of a virtual world? I think the only answer to that is ultimately when the line between that virtual world and our actual world gets really blurry. That's probably about Web 4 time, give or take.
Very exciting. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and announce our surprise, which I mentioned a little earlier, but now is the time that it will start. So for the first 3 Landians that post a video or a picture of themselves watching this AMA on Twitter, we're going to be giving an exclusive wallpaper to them. So go ahead and do that now so that we can pick the winner. And then we've got a few questions we've got a couple of more questions to go through. So the first thing is if we have any samples or images of what a property might look like in the metaverse.
Yeah, I think we can post some of those in the community a bit later on today or tomorrow. We have a lot of builders that are building their assets for Landian right now. Those are independent companies, those are individuals, those are commercial clients that we have. Landian doesn't build, for anyone really. And ultimately, the tools that you can use for that range on the very low end, something like Google SketchUp or AutoCAD, upwards into Unity and Unreal 5 to make it more realistic, Blender, a lot of the other tools that can be helped there. The realism of some of these spaces, particularly what's happened with the latest updates, specifically in Unreal 5 and the Nanite, has completely blown me away just in the past 6 months or so.
Wow.
And some of the things that we have clients coming in with right now, I literally had someone come in with a picture of a metahuman that we'd helped them collaborate with. We'd scanned it, and then we'd handed it off to their team to actually work on it. And they came back in about a week ago, and it was a picture of the model. It was a beautiful woman, and they put the thing down in front of me, and they said, "What do you think about this?" And I said, "Oh, I think the flash probably should have been better." And they said, "No, that's not a picture." And it blew my mind because, the realism is getting to that point, and just a little bit of work gets you there. So I think it's really up to the community how deep they want to go with that dive. They can get as infinite in detail as the texture on this surface. It really depends on how far they want to go.
Wow, that's super exciting. It makes sense that when we were talking about Web 4, that reality and virtual sort of blending when graphics are becoming as realistic as they are.
Yeah.
All right, so one other question we have from one of the folks that is tuning in is Josh asks, sorry if I missed it, but do we have a timeline for release of the mapping guidelines, land sale, and then alpha launch?
Yeah, so we did cover this a bit earlier. Timeline is basically beginning of September for the auctions to go up, and then associated with that, the districts will be announced with the map update, which is going to happen about a week beforehand. The DAO and the guidelines associated with each particular district are going to be published thereafter. And then we're going to have community guidelines voting in on what the DAO rules are going to be collectively for each particular district.
That's very exciting. And hopefully that answers your question, Josh.
Thanks,
so our next question, and I think it's our last question, is if you could talk a bit about what banks and financial institutions can use the metaverse for, and how might that integrate into Web3?
Sure. So it remains to be seen how banking is going to happen inside of the metaverse. There are a lot of theories. We have a lot of companies that we're working with right now that are doing traditional payment service providing routes, everything from credit cards to PayPal and stuff in between. Obviously, crypto integrates into that system as well. Most of the interest that we have at this moment from banks and financial institutions is actually more associated with how they can give a metaverse experience to either their clients or their employees. And what we're seeing a lot of, going back to what we were referring to previously about customer service and things like that, we're taking the best experiences that their customers have and we're trying to replicate those in the metaverse and give them the ability to do real-time feedback on whether or not that's actually working. And so I can give you a couple of examples of how this can actually work for all companies in the future. As an example, one of our clients is now cataloging through their best performing salespeople in the entire world. And they're taking the phrases and they're putting that into written speech. That written speech is being analyzed by an algorithm to determine which ones have a higher close rate based on historical numbers. That is then going into another algo that's using different speech patterns. Those speech patterns are now determining what the close rates are on those people, and that's being cross-referenced with the demographics of where they're using it. So do people in this state or this country react better or worse to someone with this accent or this ethnicity or this sex or whatever it may be? Each one of those things is being evaluated, and they're actually able to determine with us how that perfect avatar looks like for that perfect person. And you can sit there and switch through them and so on. That same experience by some of our customers in education sectors and things like that are being used to train people. And that training process, we're seeing incredible acceleration rates compared to what it would normally be. Information absorption rates are up by about 30%, which is really, really substantial. So when you look at the university in the metaverse versus actually showing up to a classroom, it kind of looks like you might learn more over here. I'm not going to say that to any universities. We've got a lot that we work with, no disrespect. But ultimately, we do feel that it's going to be an incredible tool for a lot of those things. What banking and finance use for that are ultimately going to be the same thing. It's whatever converts better for them and whatever performance is the best.
Exciting. Just so many opportunities for so many different businesses and people and organizations.
For sure.
All right, we've got a couple of more questions. All right, so we have a question about if I can build a library inside Landian, and how would I go about doing that?
You can certainly build a library inside of Landian. I don't want to nerd out on the answer to this, but there's a lot of options. So if you were to make a library and make a book, that book, let's say it had 300 pages, you could theoretically make all 300 of those pages, and each one would have everything on it, and you would actually flip and see those. That can be mimicked graphically, right? So what would actually happen is if you grab that book, you sit down next to a fireplace in a very comfy chair with a blanket or what have you, and you open it up, that book's visual representation of those pages would be kind of like your Kindle is today. When you go to actually turn the page, you would click on it. It would give you an animation of what happens on that next page, and then the next bit of content would be written. from a database standpoint, that is X amount of data instances. There's 300 of them. This is what data is associated with that, and then this is the graphical interface that interprets that information. So that is technically the way that you could do it. You could theoretically make a book that was the size of a house in Landian, and then you could have a series of pages that were your walls. It really depends on what you want to do and how you want to make that library experience. But yes, you could replicate an actual library. If you wanted to really, really get crazy with it, you could instance those books back to their actual archives. As an example, there's a lot of trademarks and copyright things that have been dropped on historical pieces, whether it be Charles Dickens or
Right.
whomever. And that information is publicly available as APIs. So if you wanted to have sort of the classics that whatever it was, you'd be able to pull that out, reference that API, drop it into that book, and actually sit there and read it. You could also have one book that had everything.
Wow, the options are limitless. All right, so we've got another question from Pistol Grip Pete, which is if Landian will be supported by just Oculus or other VR headsets as well?
All of them.
All of them. And then he has another question, which is if we can make our metahuman look like anything, and if we can create such as a cartoon character, or have to be focused on sort of a human-like creation.
Do whatever you want, Pete. Whatever you want.
Limitless. All right, so really quickly, I'm going to give a final shout out to some other folks that have tuned in. So we have Mina T, we have Meta Lindy's, we have Nightlife Entrepreneurs, and we have Seen First. So thank you so much for tuning in. So now that we sort of covered everything, thank you so much for being here with us. Don't forget to post that video or photo of you tuning into our AMA on Twitter, as that that competition is still open. But we really appreciate you tuning in. We will also have a new blog post today, as well as more content to come. We'll be doing these bi-weekly, so feel free to tune in next time. We'd love to have you. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to follow our Twitch and Twitter, and of course join our Discord and Telegram groups. But thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.